relax. Okay. Just pay attention, and I'll get out of this okay. Orientation Center. Where is the Orientation Center?
Hi.
Morning.
Are you my supervisor?
No, this is my first day on the job.
Oh, this is my first day on any job. I just finished my pre-app last week.
Well, congratulations. Pre-apprenticeship training's good training. Welcome to the big leagues. You'll get some good experience here. What do you got here?
I'm trying out this.
Oh, yeah, the safety vests, they're always a little tough to figure out.
Hey. Judd.
Hi, Trevor.
Good morning.
I'm Brent. You'll be working with me. Now, you got the company information packages there. That's good. We want to get you over to the timekeeper, get you signed up, and then I'll introduce you to a couple of people around here. Then after that, we'll come back, watch the company profile video, and we'll start the safety orientation. All right?
All right, let's
go. Okay, so we got you two signed up properly. I mean, now it's time to talk about safety on the job site. Every person that comes on our work site must go through a safety orientation. Visitors and suppliers go through a condensed version. Now, this session needs to be fairly in-depth for you, Judd, because this is your first day on the work site. Trevor, how many of these have you been through?
Dozens. One for every site I've worked on. But every project's different, and the situations are changing every day. We have to know what to expect. In this business, mistakes can have some pretty serious consequences.
Exactly. And to make sure we're on top of that, our company has put together a health and safety orientation program to help us supervisors train our new hires. That's you two guys. This program is sort of like a shopping list for construction safety. It deals with everything we need, point by point. It gets updated frequently and has some job action photographs to give you examples of some of the situations you'll probably find yourself working in. Here, take a look at it. Now, the orientation program is broken down into sections. The first section covers site responsibilities, top to bottom. Who's responsible for what and when. The rest of the information covers the safety aspects of the work we do on site, like how to properly handle tools and materials. We'll discuss housekeeping on the job. Then we'll talk about using and maintaining your PPE, your personal protective equipment. Did you cover that stuff in school?
Sure, we had some videos, but not very much hands-on experience.
Okay, well, keep in mind your training never really stops. I mean, like Trevor said, things in this business can change every day, so we develop a mindset to always keep learning and training. Always ask questions, especially if you're not sure about something, and particularly when it involves the safety of yourself or anyone else on the site. We'll look at using ladders, scaffolds, and temporary work platforms, followed by fall protection, including fall arrest and fall restraint systems, suspended and elevating work platforms, working with cranes, hoists, and mobile equipment, what a confined space is and what rules apply to working in confined spaces. You have to know what and where first aid is and how to summon help if you need it. We'll look at rescue situations and also when a site evacuation may be necessary. Electrical safety, that's something we don't want to take for granted. Lockout, what this means and what are the site policies and procedures. There are many different types of potentially hazardous energy sources on the job site, and some of these are going to surprise you. You have to be aware of these energy sources and respect them when you work. We'll be looking at working all types of excavations. Road construction, there's usually some form of road building on every site. And finally, we'll look at hygiene issues, and I don't mean having to take a shower every week, whether you need it or not. Let's get to rights and responsibilities. Now, the WCB in this province recently updated their occupational health and safety regulations. That meant big changes for the rules that govern our industry. And whether we like it or not, these changes are designed to keep us all safe on the job. These regulations and responsibilities were formulated by government and the WCB after consultations with all these groups. Next, our clients are the project owners, and they have a responsibility both to their employees and to the regulatory bodies like the WCB. Now, the client works with their project management groups and the prime contractors to establish and maintain the health and safety standards that become a part of our safety programs on the job. Suppliers are responsible to ensure that all tools and materials they send us actually meet or exceed their required safety standards, and that we're supplied with all the necessary information about those products.
You mean MSDS and operating instructions, things like that?
Right. Do you know what MSDS stands for, Judd?
Sure, Material Safety Data Sheet. It tells us how hazardous the products are that we're using and how to use them or handle them, and yeah, what to do when someone is exposed to them.
Right. All that comes under WHMIS, which we'll get into in the next section. This brings us to our company's responsibility, which is set out by the regulations, so we'll go over the parts that concern you. Number one, the company has to provide a safe work environment. That is probably your most important right on any job site, a safe place to work. This also means you don't take any unnecessary risks and you don't perform any work tasks that you know are against these laws. It's important for you to know that we spend a lot of time and effort in ongoing risk and hazard assessment to find the safest way to do the work. If a certain task ever appears to be too dangerous or there's an obvious potential for injury, let your supervisor know right away and we'll find a better way to do it. It's been said a million times, but I'll say it again. Safety first, last, and always. It's one of our main responsibilities. Another one of the company's responsibilities is to make sure that all the information we just talked about is available to you on site. Things like the risk and hazard assessments are kept in the site office, along with copies of the WCB Act and regulations. We also have local licenses or permits and copies of our health and safety programs. You have our company handout to keep and to update for yourself. The main bulletin board has up-to-date copies of important notices and publications from the WCB and other government agencies like the Fire Department. You'll also find the minutes of the most recent Joint Health and Safety Committee meetings, posted along with incident and inspection reports and safe work procedures. There is a site plot plan showing the location of first aid stations, access and exit points, and evacuation routes. Needless to say, there's a ton of information to keep up with. It's your right to have that information available, but it's also your responsibility to make sure that you keep up with it. So check the bulletin board as often as possible for any new postings and to be aware of what's happening and changing on the site. Now, probably your most important resource on any job site is the people you work with. The people you'll have the most direct contact with are your fellow workers and, more importantly, your supervisors. People like me out there have a responsibility to the company and by law to make sure the job gets done properly, and we're responsible to you for your safety. Now, in a nutshell, the supervisor's responsibility are to instruct and direct you in safe work procedures, ensure that you're qualified and trained for the assigned tasks, enforce WCB and company policies and procedures, regularly inspect your work areas for potential hazards or any unsafe actions by you or others and to correct those situations, and to identify any crew members with any physical or mental impairments that could affect the safety of any crew member. So please respect the job we have to do and respect the experience and authority of your coworkers. Help out by cooperating and following the rules. They're written for your protection. Okay so far? Good. That covers some of the legal stuff. Now you can see that we all have a role to play. Let's get down to what we physically do on the job. Handling materials. What are the potential injury implications? What do you think is the #1 type of injury that occurs in a construction site? Trevor?
Sprains and strains.
Exactly. Except now we call them musculoskeletal injuries, or MSIs, and RSIs, which are repetitive strain injuries. When do you think these injuries are most likely to occur?
Monday morning and Friday afternoon.
That's a big part of it. I guess you were paying attention in class that day, huh? Statistics show that these kinds of injuries account for about 35% of all injuries in our industry. And these soft tissue injuries occur primarily from overexertion. You've seen those guys out there in the morning or just after a break, trying to do too much before their muscles are warmed up. Or, like you said, Judd, late in the week or late in the day, or maybe even just before coffee, lunchtime, or quitting time, when they're rushing to get things finished. I mean, do you play any sports? You get warmed up before you hit the field. Check out your equipment. Make sure you're ready to go. You don't want to get hurt because then you're out of the game and somebody else takes your place. So keep your head in the game and listen to your body, especially before or after a break in the action. Don't be afraid to back off for a minute if you feel you have to. Next up, housekeeping and the safe handling and storage of tools and materials. About 17% of all construction site injuries are caused by being struck by something. That's number 2 on the list, and some of that is due to tools or materials accidentally falling from above and striking someone. When we go on site, you'll see that this site looks pretty clean and organized, and we take pride in that. If you leave tools or scrap materials lying around, somebody is going to trip on it or slip on it or kick it over the edge. I've seen it happen, and it's not going to happen on my shift, okay? Good. Now, we actually have a housekeeping plan as part of our safety program. All hallways, stairs, ramps, or access and exit routes are always kept clear. And tools and equipment are put away in the lockups every night. Extension cords and hoses are routed properly around the site and in your work area. All materials are stacked or stored properly and securely, and all disposal areas are identified and barricaded where necessary.
Brad, I've hurt myself slipping on an oil puddle on the floor. Don't forget about the liquid garbage.
Well, that's a good point. If you see something like that, Judd, make sure you clean it up immediately. Don't ignore it. Let's move on to personal protective equipment and clothing. You know the basics, hard hat and safety boots. Make sure that they fit properly and are approved to the current standards. You can add to the list of basic PPE, eye protection, hearing protection, and high visibility vests. On some sites, or even for some tasks on a certain area of a site, all these items are mandatory. Now, you may have to wear goggles or face shields, shock-resistant rubber-soled boots, or even chemical-resistant gloves and fire-retardant coveralls. We might have to fit you for a respirator or even self-contained breathing apparatus. We'll make sure you've got the right protection for the job, and a big part of that is proper cleaning, storing, and maintenance of the equipment. We'll show you how to wear, use, and maintain this gear. We expect you to maintain your personal equipment too. Be aware that there are regular inspections by our own safety officers, supervisors, or joint committee members, and inspections by WCB officers. Oh, and one of the new regulations require that we wear chin straps on our hard hats every time we're working at an elevation of more than 3 meters or in high wind conditions. Any questions? Judd?
Where would I be working with a respirator?
Maybe for confined space work or working with chemicals or solvents, or even in an area where there's a lot of dust particles in the air. Now, don't worry, Judd. You'd never get anywhere near a situation like a confined space without proper training. Sometimes that involves a special course to get the right certification. We brought up WHMIS earlier. That stands for Workplace Hazardous Materials Information Systems. That information is available in the first aid room, and it tells us how to handle every hazardous product we may come into contact with on the job. If you need to know about certain chemicals, gases, or air contaminants like concrete or silica dust and how they can affect you or how you should protect yourself from them, all the requirements and procedures are listed in the WHMIS documents. Oh, if you ever get into a situation with which you have a significant fear, like you're claustrophobic in a small space, or if you have a fear of heights, let us know before you get into it. We'll get someone else for that task. Okay, ladders. Lots of rules regarding the use of ladders on the site. As you can imagine, there's lots of opportunity for screwing up on a ladder. You'll probably be up and down ladders every day on the job. Falls from elevation are number 3 on the injury list. They account for about 13% of all injuries in this industry. Most of these falls are related to work from ladders and other elevated work platforms. That's why there are so many rules governing the use of ladders. We take them for granted and sometimes try to use them for things they weren't designed for. Ladders can only be used for light-duty, short-term tasks, and they can't be used if your center of gravity extends beyond the side rails. You should have one hand holding on to the ladder at all times, even if you're wearing fall protection. Don't carry anything heavy or bulky up or down a ladder. Inspect any ladder before you use it. Make sure it's in good condition, no loose or broken rungs or split rails. Make sure it sits level and that the top and bottom is secured. Ladders have to be placed against a wall using the 1 in 4 rule. That means the distance from the base of the ladder to the wall is no less than 1/4 of the measurement from the ground to the point where the ladder contacts the top of the wall, like this. Also, if you're using a ladder for access to another work area, make sure the ladder extends past the top of the wall by at least 1 meter. If you're working on a ladder supported against a wall or using a portable folding ladder, never do any work from the top 2 rungs. If it's not tall enough, find the right ladder, or better yet, get a more stable work platform. Which brings us to scaffolds. These are used extensively by almost all trades. You have to be trained and qualified to erect or dismantle scaffolds, or supervised by someone who is qualified. In some cases, you have to be supervised by a professional engineer. Inspect the scaffold every day, just like you would a ladder, and especially if the scaffold has been moved or modified in any way. The scaffold has to be plumb and level, and the whole thing has to be supported properly on a foundation or on proper sills. When the height of a scaffold is 3 times the smallest dimension at the base, the whole thing must be attached to a wall or secured by guy wires. If the working platform or the scaffold is over 3 meters high, then we install guardrails and toe boards on all open sides. Make sure the planks are secured. There can't be more than 25 centimeters between the wall and an open side of a scaffold. If you ever have to work on a scaffold and you're not sure if the thing will support the weight of you, your fellow crew members, and your materials, have it checked out by your supervisor. Fall protection. The industry has come a long way in reducing the number of fall-related accidents over the last few years. The occupational health and safety requirements are very strict now. Any work done over 3 meters or at any height over dangerous equipment or surfaces requires the use of fall protection. This can mean guardrails, a full body harness attached to a lanyard, or a lifeline on an anchoring system. It may be a safety net, a control zone, or a monitor and control zone, or a combination of any of these devices. The bottom line is that it has to protect you and be acceptable under the law. There are 2 kinds of fall protection: fall arrest and fall restraint. Fall restraint systems limit the movement of a person, like a guardrail or a safety zone. Fall arrest systems are intended to stop you from hitting the ground or any other object if you do fall. Fall arrest systems are typically the body harness and lanyards attached to lifelines or the use of safety nets. Inspect and maintain your fall protection systems like your life depends on it. Loose or broken guardrails must be reported and repaired. Worn out or frayed equipment or harnesses have to be replaced. Use your common sense and don't let anyone take any unnecessary risks when working at any elevation. When we're working at elevations of over 7 meters, or when we use a safety monitor and control zone, we have the fall protection plan in writing posted on the site, and everyone involved is instructed and trained according to that plan. Sometimes you work in areas where scaffolds won't be practical. In those cases, we use suspended or elevating work platforms like swing stages or man baskets, suspended from a crane or a hoist, or we'll use a scissor lift. Many of these units are self-propelled, so to work with them, you require specific training on how to operate them safely. They have load limits and rated capacity stamped on the machine. Check to make sure you won't exceed the limits. Most of these units come equipped with fall protection devices like guardrails and toe boards, but you are required to use a personal fall arrest system in most cases. Before you operate one of these work platforms, do your own safety inspection. Take note of the ground you'll be traveling over, remove any obstacles like hoses or cables, and make sure the ground under the machine is level and stable.
Well, what do we hook our lanyards to when we're working on these platforms?
A good question. Look for an anchor point on the machine's platform.
If the machine were to topple over, you don't want to go with it. So you want to hook onto a ceiling anchor or another type of anchor that's been installed for that purpose. The anchor has to be designed to specific safety standards.
You'll be working with or around large mobile equipment like cranes, hoists, backhoes, bulldozers, dump trucks, etc. Only authorized personnel can operate these types of equipment, and there are rules we have to follow when working around them. Tower cranes are common on the job, and they have warning alarms to signal a swinging load. Keep an eye open for riggers and signalers that work with these cranes and pay attention to what they are doing. Make sure they see you. Always wearing your high-vis vest will help. If you're working near large mobile equipment, your best safety precaution is to establish eye contact with the operator. If you can't see them, they probably can't see you. Line of sight is always the rule. They'll keep an eye out for you, but they will expect you to pay attention to what they are working on too. Remember, struck by incidents are number 2 on the injury list, and getting struck by a large piece of mobile equipment can be very serious, sometimes fatal. If an area around a piece of mobile equipment is barricaded or otherwise restricted, don't enter that area unless the machine operator permits you to do so. If you ever do operate this type of equipment, make sure the safety devices are operational. Make sure the lights work, the backup alarm activates properly, and always wear a seatbelt. You'll also want to check that the roll cage is in good condition. Earlier, we touched on working in confined spaces. This can be really serious business, so there are special procedures and training for doing work in these types of areas. A confined space is defined as an area other than an underground working that is enclosed or partially enclosed, is not designed for continuous human occupancy, is anything you have to climb into, through a hatch or grate, and is large enough that a worker can enter to perform the assigned work. Confined spaces can be things like vaults or storage tanks or vats, large piping systems, and even some configurations of trenches or excavations. These areas are first identified through our hazard and risk assessment, and these locations are posted on the bulletin board. They are clearly identified by signage at the access points. If you see one that isn't marked correctly, let us know immediately. Before we go to work in a confined space, we review the specific hazard assessment done at the start of the job. We review the procedures for working in that space. Then we get the necessary permits and make sure we have all the specialized protective equipment we'll need to do the work. We test the environment in that space to find out if there are harmful air contaminants present, and we'll continue to test the atmosphere in there as we work. We monitor for oxygen deficiency, flammable gases, vapors, combustible dust, anything that could be hazardous to you. Individual responsibilities are clearly defined for all confined space work. Make sure you follow the plan and procedures if you're involved. They were designed to help protect you. First aid. Our sites are well stocked with the required medical supplies and equipment, and at all times there are first aid personnel available to supply treatment for you in the event of an injury or illness on the job. If you suffer an injury requiring off-site medical treatment or an emergency referral, those people will arrange for that too. As part of your site-specific orientation, we will point out the first aid stations, introduce you to the first aid designates, and show you how to summon help if you or any of your crew members require first aid on the job. Usually a supervisor or co-worker with a radio is your first choice for summoning aid. But in the event of a more serious injury, there are several signaling devices strategically located around the site that will summon immediate assistance. Rescue. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes we have to perform an emergency extraction or rescue at elevation or from a confined space. This type of rescue usually requires significant training and expertise, along with specialized technical equipment. So we most often leave it to the experts. We include provisions for these potential rescue situations in our project plans, and these plans most often involve the local fire and rescue team. You'll see them periodically consulting with us on site, making sure that they know what we're doing and what they may be faced with if they get called into a rescue situation. We don't ever try to perform rescues without the proper training and equipment. Heroes don't always make it out alive. Just check the statistics. Job evacuations. Again, as part of the initial risk assessment process, we assess the potential for major disaster that could require a site-wide emergency evacuation. A written evacuation plan is posted on the bulletin board. We'll look at what you're supposed to do in the event of a situation like this on the job. Plans like this change as the job site changes, so the supervisors keep their crew members up to speed through our weekly toolbox safety meetings or other crew briefings. Electricity is the #1 power source on the job. We've grown so used to it, we almost take it for granted. That's why it's such a dangerous potential hazard. It's the silent killer. In your work, you'll probably be using electricity for operating lights, hand tools, ventilation fans, etc. Don't ever be casual or careless when working with or around electricity. Contact with overhead power lines by cranes, elevating work platforms, ladders, or tools remains the #1 electrical killer. This table defines the minimum safe approach distances for working near electricity of different voltages. Only qualified personnel with special permission are allowed to work closer than these minimum distances when they have to. Make sure you know what kind of voltage is in overhead power lines and keep to the minimum safe distance. Electricity can arc over short distances. That's why we follow these rules. Power sources and overhead power lines should always be clearly marked. You'll also see underground services located and signed. If you come across one that isn't marked, tell your supervisor and get it checked out before you work near it. Keep an eye open for your fellow crew members and any mobile equipment working near electrical sources. You might see something they haven't noticed. All companies we work with have a site-wide grounding policy or an assured grounding program for each job. You'll be briefed on which standard applies for each project. Grounding policies may require any electrical power source or accessory that you'll use, whether it's a distribution table or an extension cord, to be equipped with a ground fault circuit interrupter, or GFCI. If you've got a connection, a damaged cord, or a plug that's corroded or laying in water, there's a good chance it could short circuit. A GFCI will prevent that by shutting down the circuit before it shorts. The downside of GFCIs is if you happen to be operating a power tool when the circuit is broken, the tool could kick out of your grip or get stuck in the material, or worse, you could suffer an injury. The alternative is assured grounding, regular inspection of all electrical accessories, combined with a quarterly color coding designation. So follow the rules of the grounding program. Inspect all your power tools, connections, and extension cords. Get them repaired if they're cut, frayed, or corroded. Take care of extension cords. Connect them securely. Don't ever leave the connection in water, and route them properly around the job to keep them from becoming a slip or trip hazard. Cover them or remove them from high traffic areas if they could get run over and damaged by people or mobile equipment. Most importantly, don't take electricity for granted on the job, especially around high voltage situations. You normally won't get any warning or get another chance if you make a mistake with electricity. Lockout, just like it sounds. We actually lock out electrical circuits and equipment so it can't be used. Say, for example, you and 2 other crew members are doing repairs or maintenance work on a large electrical motor in some industrial plant. Each one of those workers wants to be sure this motor can't be switched on while they have their hands in it. Each of you will put a lock on the switch that activates the motor. The electrician that shut down the power supply for you will have his lock on the scissor clip too. Lockout procedures are written and posted on site, and there are forms to be filled out to track what locks are assigned to whom, and where and when those locks are in use. You'll get more instruction and direction on lockout procedures when you get involved in this type of activity. What other types of energy sources might you find on a job site?
Chemical energy from chemical reactions. Thermal energy, like heat from welders or steam, or hot water.
Right. How about kinetic energy from moving equipment and materials, like a conveyor belt, or potential energy, stored in any equipment, material, or tool that can move, fall, or break? There's also radiating energy from lights or lasers, or sometimes from X-ray machines that are used to test or probe materials. The point is that apart from electricity, there are always other energy sources we have to be aware of. If you're not aware of the potential hazards associated with these energy sources, you can get yourself into a dangerous situation and not even know it. Think about that when you're on the site and be aware of what's going on around you. This next section covers a topic that you'll see on just about every site: excavations. Sometimes they're as big as a city block, others are the size of a small trench. Excavations can be really hazardous if appropriate precautions aren't taken. Before we ever start digging, we draw up a plan for the excavation. We first locate underground utility services like gas and electric lines. At times, this is done by manual shovel probing to find and permanently mark those services. We have to make sure that we don't undermine any trees, poles, fences, or walls that are near the excavation. They are secured if there is any potential they could be affected by our work. If we're working in an excavation deeper than 4 feet or 1.2 meters, the sides and ends of the excavation have to be correctly sloped, benched, or supported by shoring, or a trench box or cage is used. This, of course, is done to prevent cave-ins. We have a professional engineer or geoscientist do an assessment on the various types of excavation work before operating any equipment like vibrators. The engineer will examine the soil type, evaluate the type of work we need to do, and give us written procedures for completing our excavation. WCB regulations outline further rules for excavation work. Shoring must extend at least 30 centimeters above the edge of the trench to prevent materials from falling in. Ladders or other means of access must be securely positioned within 8 meters of where crew members are working. Other safety devices and precautions may need to be in place. Your supervisor will provide the appropriate instruction and direction for site-specific situations. Road building of some sort happens on almost every site. Lots of heavy-duty mobile equipment is normally involved. They're usually required to have running lights, warning lights, and backup alarms. These machines usually operate in conjunction with signalers and traffic control people. Make sure you're wearing your high visibility vest and obey the line of sight rule with the operators and signalers. If you are authorized to operate these machines, seat belts must be worn if they're installed. Most machines equipped with rollover protective structures have seat belts. Hygiene. What we mean is occupational hygiene technology that has been incorporated into our hazard and risk assessment process. This technology is designed to recognize, evaluate, and control or eliminate potential work environment hazards, such as chemical hazards like harmful airborne concentrations of vapors or gases or solids in the forms of dust or fumes. Physical hazards. Those obvious hazards caused by oversight or error. Things that can crop up on a daily basis. We include noise, vibration, radiation, and extreme temperatures in this group. Biological hazards might include insect bites or stings, sanitation factors like drinking water, sewage and waste removal, mold or mildew, and even personal cleanliness. Ergonomic hazards are most often created by using the wrong technique to accomplish a task. If you use the wrong tool the wrong way, or you lift something incorrectly, or suddenly reach beyond your grasp, or repeatedly perform a series of awkward movements that could result in an RSI, these are the types of things classified as ergonomic hazards. Most of these hygiene issues are recognized through experience and common sense. But we're always finding new potential hazards, and we always want to know when something new comes up. Let your supervisor know immediately if you recognize something we don't know about, and especially when you're not sure about it. Okay, we're almost done. Let's hit the high points once more in review. We'll do it in reverse order this time. Occupational hygiene. Controlling the way in which we come into contact with any potentially hazardous products or materials in the immediate environment. Road construction usually means extra traffic control measures and heavy-duty mobile equipment. Follow the line of sight rule with signalers and operators. Excavation safety. The regulations define the rules for all work in anything deeper than 1.2 meters. We usually work with engineers or geoscientists for anything deeper than a typical trench or foundation. Energy sources we find on the job. We looked at kinetic energy, chemical, thermal, radiating, and especially potential energy. Lockout. Read and follow the written procedures for any work requiring lockout protection. Electrical safety. Remember the safe limits of approach. Contact with overhead power lines is still the #1 electrical killer. Get to know the rules, whether your task requires GFCI or an assured grounding program. Rescue situations and site evacuations. Emergency extractions from confined space or from elevation are planned for at the risk assessment stage of every job. Emergency crews with specialized equipment plan for and practice these rescues and are the only people that should perform them. Job evacuation plans are posted and updated as the job site changes. You'll get notification of the changes from your supervisors and through your safety meetings. First aid on site. Make sure you know where to get first aid and who will administer first aid and how to summon help if you or one of your coworkers needs it. Confined space work has its own unique set of rules and regulations. We post the plan and procedures which come out of our initial risk and hazard assessments. And everyone who's involved is properly trained, equipped, and authorized for working in that confined space. Mobile equipment, cranes, and hoists. Remember the line of sight rule and make eye contact with the operator when you work around mobile equipment, hoists, and tower cranes. Make sure they see you and don't become a struck-by statistic. Suspended and elevating work platforms. Do a daily safety inspection. Don't exceed the rated capacities or load limits. Use fall protection equipment and check the ground you'll be traveling over if you're using a mobile platform like a scissor lift. Fall protection for all work done above 3 meters. Fall restraint systems limit movement and fall arrest systems stop a fall. Always inspect restraint systems like guardrails and check arrest systems like harnesses, lanyards, lifelines, and connection points. When the height you're at is over 7 meters, the fall protection plan is in writing and is posted on site. Working on ladders, scaffolds, and temporary work platforms. When using a scaffold or other platform, we do a daily inspection of the structure and also make sure we don't exceed the load limits. Make sure it's plumb and square and that it's erected on a stable, level foundation. We use ladders nearly every day in this business. Remember the 13% statistic? Falls from elevation, the number 3 cause of construction injuries. Don't carry anything heavy or bulky up or down a ladder. Keep one hand holding onto the ladder at all times. Keep your center of balance within the side rails and don't work from the top 2 rungs of any ladder. Use ladders only for light-duty short-term tasks and get a more stable platform for more difficult tasks. WHMIS. Make sure you know where to find these documents. They're usually kept in the first aid station. PPE. Take care of your personal gear. Replace it if it is defective or worn out. Chin straps on the hard hat when you work over 3 meters in height. Eye protection should be worn at all times, even if it isn't mandatory on that job site. Hearing protection is always a necessity. Keep some earplugs in your pocket. Some tasks will require that you use specialized PPE. You'll be trained and authorized in the use, maintenance, and storage of this equipment. Housekeeping. Keep your work areas organized and fairly tidy. No slip and trip hazards on the ground. Make sure hallways, stairways, and access routes are clear. Don't leave tools, equipment, or materials lying around, and make sure your stuff gets locked up at night. Use your common sense when it comes to housekeeping. There's not much worse for a supervisor than to have to ask a professional construction worker to pick up after themselves. Handling materials. We talked about keeping focused and listening to your body, not overexerting yourself, especially after a break in the action. Remember that MSIs and RSIs are the #1 type of injury in our industry. The first thing we discussed today was the chain of responsibility of everyone involved on a construction job. Remember our list of the players in the industry. At the top, we had the government and the Workers' Compensation Board, responsible for bringing into law all the regulations that govern the industry. Then we had the project owners, the people referred to as construction clients. Then came the project managers and the prime contractors. These are the people most responsible to plan, organize, staff, direct, and coordinate the work. Subcontractors and suppliers owe as much responsibility to their own people as they do to everyone else they come into contact with on the site. Then we get down to where you and I live, supervisors and tradespersons, the people that actually do all the work around here. The new WCB regulations clearly state exactly what you and I are responsible for on the job site. We've reformatted it here for these orientation sessions. Go ahead, Judd, and read this section to us.
Okay. General duties of workers. We are all legally responsible to know and follow WCB health and safety requirements and our employers' policies on our jobs. Ensure that our ability to work without risk to health and safety of ourselves and others is not impaired by alcohol, drugs, or other causes. Inform our supervisors of any physical or mental impairment that may affect our ability to work safely. Ask our supervisors for instruction or direction or training necessary to do the work safely. Operate only tools and equipment we have been trained and authorized to use. Participate in all health and safety training and educational activities. Use all our personal protective equipment and clothing as we've been instructed. Work safely and encourage our fellow employees to do the same. Correct any unsafe conditions or immediately report them to our immediate supervisor. Immediately report any injury to our supervisor and the designated first aid person. Make suggestions as to what might improve health and safety in our company. Refuse to perform activities that we believe will put ourselves or others at unnecessary risk.
Good. So does reading that help you understand why we go through such a thorough orientation process?
Yeah, brings it all into focus for me. We can actually be responsible for a lot more than just our own work.
Sounds like we can have a responsibility to almost everyone on the site. It's as if what we do affects us and everyone around us, not just today, but into the future too.
No, that's right. Sometimes in some situations you do have that responsibility. That's why it's so crucial that you know how serious all this safety planning is. That's what being a professional construction worker is all about. Hey, you just became the most important person on the site.